Welcome to Global Watch. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Tonight, we witness a crisis unfolding along the banks of the Nile, a river whose waters have shaped the destiny of Egypt for thousands of years. The Nile is not just a river. It is the very heartbeat of a nation, a source of life, culture, and identity. For millennia, its annual floods nourished the land, allowing ancient civilizations to flourish and modern cities to thrive. Generations have depended on its steady flow, building a society that is inseparable from the river's embrace. But now, the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, known as GERD, stands upstream, a colossal structure that has forever changed the river's fate. From its vantage point in Ethiopia, the dam controls the Nile's flow, fundamentally altering the delicate balance that Egypt has relied on for centuries. As of July 2025, Ethiopia is operating the dam unilaterally, filling its vast reservoir at a pace that has sent shockwaves downstream. Each day, less water reaches Egypt, and the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. The impact is stark and immediate. Riverbanks recede, once fertile fields turn brown, and the land that once teemed with life now faces creeping desolation. Along the river, fishermen cast their nets in hope, but their catches are dwindling. Anxiety and uncertainty cloud their faces as they wonder how much longer their way of life can endure. This is not merely a diplomatic standoff between two nations. It is a slow-moving catastrophe that threatens the very survival of millions. Families are abandoning their farms, and entire communities are being uprooted by the relentless advance of drought. Egypt depends on the Nile for more than 97% of its fresh water. Every drop is precious, sustaining not just agriculture but drinking water, industry, and daily life for over 100 million people. Any reduction in the river's flow could trigger a cascade of disasters: crop failures, food shortages, and widespread social unrest. Already, protests are erupting as people demand answers and action. The Egyptian government has declared a national water emergency, scrambling to find solutions as the crisis deepens. Emergency alerts flash across television screens, and officials warn of difficult days ahead. In the streets of Cairo and beyond, a sense of fear and uncertainty hangs in the air. Markets are crowded, but the mood is tense, as citizens worry about the future of their families and their country. For Ethiopia, the GERD is a beacon of hope, a symbol of national pride, progress, and sovereignty. It promises electricity for millions and the chance to lift communities out of poverty, fueling dreams of a brighter future. But for Egypt, the dam is an existential threat. Years of negotiations have failed, and diplomatic channels have all but collapsed. The two nations now stand at a dangerous impasse, with trust eroding on both sides. Egypt is appealing to the international community, urging world leaders and organizations to intervene before the crisis spirals out of control. The United Nations and global powers are watching closely, aware that the stakes extend far beyond the region. The world's eyes are fixed on the Nile, the cradle of civilization, now at risk of becoming the epicenter of a 21st century water conflict. The outcome here could set a precedent for water disputes everywhere. The stakes could not be higher, for Egypt, for Ethiopia, for the entire Nile basin, and for a world facing growing water scarcity. The next chapter in this ancient river's story is being written now, and its consequences will echo for generations to come. Egypt's identity is inseparable from the Nile. For over 5,000 years, the river has shaped its civilization, economy, and culture. Nearly all Egyptians live along the Nile Valley and Delta, relying on its water for drinking, farming, and industry. Colonial-era treaties once guaranteed Egypt's water share, but upstream nations like Ethiopia reject these as outdated and unfair. Egypt sees any threat to the Nile as a threat to its existence. Ethiopia sees the Blue Nile as its sovereign right. This fundamental clash, historical dependence versus developmental aspiration, has led to a diplomatic deadlock. The river that once united a civilization now risks dividing a continent. The Nile's future is now a source of bitter contention. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, is Africa's largest hydroelectric project, a colossal structure that has captured the world's attention. Towering over the Blue Nile, the dam represents a new era for Ethiopia, one where the country seeks to harness its natural resources for the benefit of its people and future generations. For Ethiopians, the GERD is much more than just a dam. It's a powerful symbol of national ambition, unity, and pride. The project has inspired hope and excitement across the country. with citizens rallying together to support its construction. Built on the mighty Blue Nile, the GERD's massive reservoir is capable of holding more water than the river's entire annual flow, fundamentally changing the landscape and the way water is managed in the region. Ethiopia envisions the dam as a crucial step toward electrifying rural communities, powering industries, and achieving economic independence. Remarkably, much of the funding came from ordinary Ethiopians, who contributed through bonds and donations, making it a true national project. Ethiopian leaders maintain that the GERD will bring prosperity not only to Ethiopia, but to the entire region, promising shared benefits and regional development, rather than harm or conflict. Yet, downstream in Egypt, there is deep anxiety. Egyptians worry that the rapid filling of the dam's reservoir could drastically reduce the flow of the Nile, threatening their water supply, agriculture, and livelihoods, especially during times of drought. Years of intense negotiations between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan have failed to produce a binding agreement on how the dam should be filled and operated, leaving the region in a state of uncertainty and tension. In July 2025, Ethiopia began unilateral operation of the GERD, moving forward without a final deal. This bold step has further escalated tensions and drawn international attention to the dispute. Egypt now views the dam's operation as a direct threat to its water security, raising fears of water shortages and potential conflict over this vital resource. Today, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam stands as both a beacon of hope for millions and a flashpoint for regional conflict. Its future impact still uncertain as the world watches closely. Years of negotiations between Egypt and Ethiopia collapsed in June 2024, with both sides refusing to compromise. Egypt demanded a binding agreement. Ethiopia insisted on sovereignty. International mediation, including U.S. involvement, failed to bridge the divide. In July 2025, Ethiopia began operating the GERD without a deal, realizing Egypt's worst fears. Egypt responded with a diplomatic offensive, appealing to the UN and framing the crisis as a human rights issue. Cairo argues Ethiopia's actions violate international law and threaten regional stability. Ethiopia remains defiant, seeing the dam as a national milestone. The two nations are now locked in a dangerous standoff. The fate of the Nile and regional peace hangs in the balance. Reduced Nile flow is already hitting Egypt's economy and people. Agriculture, which employs a third of Egyptians, faces disaster. Even a 10% drop in water could shrink output by 15%. Food prices are rising, jobs are vanishing, and Egypt's reliance on imports is growing. Water scarcity threatens drinking supplies for millions, with rationing looming in major cities. Vulnerable groups, including hundreds of thousands of refugees, are at even greater risk. The crisis also threatens Egypt's own power generation and water-dependent industries. With the economy already strained, a water crisis could push Egypt to the brink. Social unrest is a real danger, as frustration over shortages and rising costs grows. Desalination and recycling projects help, but can't replace the Nile. Amid the Nile crisis, Egypt scored a diplomatic win by brokering a peace deal in the Israel-Hamas war. This success boosted Egypt's global standing and gave it new leverage. Egypt is now using its role as a regional stabilizer to rally support for its Nile position. The message: a destabilized Egypt cannot anchor Middle East peace. At the UN, Egypt links its water crisis to broader regional stability. But the GERD dispute is a different challenge. Ethiopia is also a major power with its own narrative. Egypt hopes its diplomatic capital will translate into real pressure on Ethiopia. Whether this strategy will work remains uncertain. Experts warn the Nile crisis is a global test case for water disputes. The core impasse remains. Egypt wants a binding treaty. Ethiopia insists on control. Hydrologists fear a multi-year drought during GERD filling could cut Egypt's water by 25%, devastating agriculture. Long-term increased salinity could ruin farmland and ecosystems. The crisis could set a precedent for other transboundary water conflicts worldwide. Military conflict, once unthinkable, is now a real risk. Experts agree. Only urgent, internationally backed diplomacy can avert disaster. The world must act before the crisis spirals out of control. The Nile crisis is not just Egypt's problem, it's a global concern. Egypt is a linchpin for regional security, counterterrorism, and global trade. Instability could threaten the Suez Canal, disrupting 12% of world trade and spiking energy prices. A water crisis could trigger a massive refugee wave, straining Europe and neighboring countries. The fate of 600,000 Sudanese refugees in Egypt would worsen. The GERD dispute tests international cooperation in an era of climate-driven resource conflicts. A peaceful solution could set a model for the world. Failure would embolden unilateralism. The world's response will shape the future of shared resources. The Nile's future is a paradox: Ethiopian hope, Egyptian fear. This ancient river, a lifeline for millions, now stands at the center of a modern crisis. The stakes are high, and the consequences could be dire if a resolution isn't found soon. The GERD promises progress for Ethiopia, but peril for Egypt. For Ethiopia, the dam represents a beacon of development, a chance to electrify the nation and boost its economy. For Egypt, however, it threatens to choke off the water supply that has sustained its civilization for millennia. Water levels are dropping, and time for diplomacy is running out. The river's decline is already visible, with cracked riverbeds and receding waters painting a grim picture. The urgency for a diplomatic solution has never been greater. Egypt appeals to the world, framing this as a crisis of human rights and security. The government is vocal, urging international intervention and highlighting the potential for widespread instability if the water crisis escalates. Ethiopia stands firm on its right to development. The nation is resolute, emphasizing its sovereign right to harness the Nile's power for its people's benefit. The dam is seen as a symbol of national pride and progress. Sudan, caught in the middle, faces its own risks. As a downstream country, Sudan's fate is intertwined with the decisions made by its neighbors. The potential for both benefit and harm looms large. The world cannot afford to be a bystander. Global leaders are called to action, recognizing that the Nile's fate has far-reaching implications for regional and international stability. The stability of Egypt, the Suez Canal, and regional peace are at stake. The Suez Canal, a critical artery for global trade, could be jeopardized by escalating tensions, affecting economies worldwide. Only urgent, creative diplomacy can prevent disaster. Diplomatic efforts must be intensified, with innovative solutions and compromises to ensure a fair and lasting agreement. A binding agreement is needed, one that protects Egypt's water and allows Ethiopia's growth. Such an agreement must balance the needs and rights of all parties involved, ensuring sustainable and equitable use of the Nile's resources. The Nile must remain a source of life, not conflict. It is a shared heritage that should unite rather than divide, providing sustenance and prosperity for generations to come. The world is watching, and the clock is ticking. The urgency of the situation cannot be overstated. The time for action is now, before the opportunity for a peaceful resolution slips away.